All right, so today's session again, changes in ARM software from this last year. And we'll kind of go through them just in a kind of PowerPoint slide, and I have some short clips as we go through as well within the ARM software to kind of show some of the slightly more complex multi-step items. The first one, just highlighting some updates to the ARM Academy, that training portal we just mentioned. Just highlighting that we continue to add courses and information out on that portal. Next feature is an effort to make it more visible when we do add things to ARM. So you may have noticed throughout the year that suddenly certain items on your screen might be highlighted after downloading an ARM update. And so new features, new fields where you could put in data in a protocol or a trial, those will be highlighted when you get an update. Just for a limited time, of course, otherwise we'd end up with half of ARM all colored a certain color. So we time it based on kind of how many times you've viewed that particular screen. So for example, here I use the merge. There's a couple of options we added to the merge functionality. Well, if you don't use merge or you only do it once a year, then we wouldn't want the highlighting to go away just because you don't happen to use it that season. So you'll see it about 10 times. The first 10 times that it shows up on your screen, it'll be highlighted so you know that it's new. Any new entry fields will be hidden just for 30 days from your update, and then they'll go away. So the first real big development that we had added to ARM is a tool called Review Protocol Entries. And so this tool will allow you to review a trial for information that was originally put into the protocol and hasn't been changed since. So the goal of this is really to highlight and point out what information hasn't changed since it was first put in the protocol. And this would be done kind of as you're validating the trial to make sure that that information is accurate. So one of the concerns as a protocol writer, if they put a lot of information into a protocol, at that stage, it's just a plan. It's maybe instructions, or if all things go well, or this is the target for what should be done. Once you go to the trial, all the information in a protocol gets copied to a trial, but suddenly that means the information goes from instruction to documentation. And so that's just kind of a common concern as sponsors maybe would get their data back from a trialist, or even just reviewing trials after they're all finished is, what if this information that was entered just was forgotten about, didn't get updated because they forgot that the trialist had to update that piece of information, or was it truly that value? And so this development was really targeted to address that concern and make it easy for trialists to confirm and make sure that nothing is forgotten or missed throughout the process. So the highlighted information on the screen is the information that was entered in the protocol and has not yet been changed. So the rest of this information either was entered by the trialist, entered in the trial, or it had been changed after the protocol writer had put it in. So the information that's been untouched since it was put into the protocol, that is the information highlighted in green there. So this is performed during trial validation. And the nice thing is we tried to strategize so it wouldn't be this review the entire trial all at one time and really take a lot of time when trying to do a validation. But instead, you can continually review applicable information as it's being done in the trial. And so here you can see, looking at like an assessment data column, once you've filled in a rating date, then any of the assessment header fields that were put in from the protocol would be reviewed. Kind of the same idea with the applications as well. Once you put an application date in, that's the trigger that this application has been performed. So it's appropriate to review those type of fields, those fields as well for that particular application code. So again, if you're validating your trial throughout the season, it won't all of a sudden be this avalanche of information to review, but just the particular components of, okay, you performed, these 2 assessments since you last validated, and this one application occurred. So let's review those specific components to make sure that everything is accurate. Then all of the other sections in like the site description will be triggered once you set the trial status to final. Then the rest of those screens, those rest of those editors will be included in the validation for you to review. You can also trigger this review. So if you don't want to wait until the validation, you want to do it as a different step. We did add a menu item under the tools menu to be able to perform this review at any time. So then this will go through that same process of reviewing, but you don't have to worry about, well, what dates have I put in, or what was my trial status, anything like that. And we'll show this in just a moment, but I just kind of want to highlight, why we added this feature. And actually, it was quite a bit of development with various different ideas. I think the original idea of trying to do something like this was maybe 2 years ago, and then we went through a few different iterations of what would be the right way to accomplish what we wanted to. We kind of finally settled on this review process, and really the goal is to boost the protocol writers, to really allow them the freedom to put in information in the protocol. The goal is for them to inform and instruct on how the trial should be performed, and we want them to be able to do that with confidence that the trial will still be accurate. So we're hoping that having this functionality will really help that protocol, that you can put in information in the protocol without worrying about the trialist missing it and it becoming a source of error because things weren't quite documented correctly because they just got overlooked. On the trialist side, hopefully this will be a time saver, that you wouldn't have to manually review every screen of the trial on your own and try to remember what you've updated and what you haven't. Here now it's kind of automated for you. It's included in the validation process, so you don't forget to perform this action. And then also the highlighting is a really good way to draw your eye to, oh yeah, I haven't changed that, but oh yeah, that's the crop code. That's the one we did. Or, oh no, the stage information I didn't change. It should be this instead. So hopefully kind of both sides of the fence will really be able to benefit from this tool. So just kind of a quick look here, a little video of showing this. Again, we just have an example trial here. We fill in an application date. That's the trigger that it's been performed. Same thing with the assessment. So as we pick an assessment date, that'll actually filled in all 4 of these columns because they're all tied together with the same SE. So now when we validate the trial, ARM will just show the screen here. Let me pause this for a moment. We'll bring up, kind of regardless of where you are at in ARM, it'll bring up the different sections of the trial that are impacted and ready for review. So in this case, we're seeing the crop stage screen, and we can see that just for application A is what we're reviewing because we have not performed B yet. So we're only looking at the fields in A. And we can see that the protocol writer had put in, targeted stage information. And so we want to make sure that that is accurate, or that we would adjust it now according to what actually occurred. And same thing for, we're just highlighting again all the information that was entered in the protocol that myself as the trialist has not adjusted yet. So you can make any adjustments right on this screen. Kind of the nice thing, we just bring the whole editor into this screen so you don't have to go back and remember to change the stage majority. It's live right here. So you can click into that 14 and adjust the stage value right on this screen. And then once you see it all complete, that this is correct, down at the bottom, there's a confirmation. So you're going to select whatever components on the screen that you confirm are correct. And now I'll press resume here, and then you click confirm. And it will then display the next screen. That's the PES stage. You can go pretty quickly through, anything that doesn't have tons of information in, be pretty quick to confirm those components. Again, what's not highlighted is the information that the trialist either entered or changed since it was put in by the protocol. And here you can see, again, you just select whichever components you're ready to confirm. And just to highlight that review protocol entries menu item, that will trigger a review of all of the sections in the site description. So here now we can look at the crop details and confirm whichever components we have. And then it'll just move to the next section, pest description now, etc. There is a skip button as well. So if you maybe in your group there are several people kind of working on this research trial, and maybe you're dealing with one aspect of the trial and somebody else would be in charge of another aspect. So maybe I can't quite review all of the details of these pests. I'm just here to kind of enter data. So I could confirm the details of the assessment columns that I just filled in, but I really can't confirm the pest details yet. That's kind of why we have that skip button. So then next time we validate or run the review, these same screens will pop up and you'll need to confirm those. So that way someone else can make sure the right correct person can review that is the right information. So that's why there's the skip option as well for particular components that maybe can't be confirmed by the person currently in the trial. And again, you just go through each section and confirming those components. And now it's just looping again. So like I said, that was really the really big feature that we added. And we're really excited. I think it'll be a benefit to both sides of the trial to get the right information. And a question here about previously confirmed entries and later changed. Yeah, so once you confirm, then essentially, in a way, the highlighting would go away, and the fact that section you won't be asked to confirm later. It will be confirmed, so it'll be done. And then, yes, as soon as you change a value, then that internal flag, that internal marker that says this information hasn't been changed, would go away. And so the highlight would be removed at any point once the value is changed by the trialist. Mm-hmm. Great question. So yeah, that's really the big tool. Hopefully, right now, if you're kind of just in here, at least in the US, it's pretty quiet, just starting to write protocols. Hopefully it's just a piece of information for a protocol writer to feel confident. You can really put more information in. And then once trials start rolling through, being able to utilize this wizard as a way to save time and review the trial. So. All right, next enhancement is actually kind of a set of features. We ended up with two development items that were really ended up becoming related because we realized we really needed a spot in ARM to store settings about the ARM user. And so that really kind of two features we added to ARM really drove this idea of adding a user profile. And so this user profile is a spot where we can have particular settings and information about the ARM licensee, the person here using the ARM software on this computer. So the first section is license, just putting down the details of that ARM license. We also made it easy to add a local user or a custom password here on this screen. My example, I kind of customize my username. So instead of writing my full name, I just have my initials and I keep the same password. Others might have the main investigator is the license owner, but maybe I have someone in the office that often logs into my computer to manage trials. I could create a login for them that's just local, just to this one computer where my ARM is there. And so that would be where you could put in that local user. Then there's a maintenance tab that, of course, just puts in whatever information is related to your license renewal. What's the expiration date? When the expiration is getting closer, have a spot for that renewal invoice that you can retrieve. Then the certificate and signatures, we'll see those in a moment. Those were the new features that we added to ARM that really required us to create this profile in the first place. And then finally, there's a training section with some information about that learning portal, the ARM Academy. So looking specifically then at those two features, the first one is the trial signature. So we added the ability to add your signature to a trial, effectively be able to sign off on a trial. So within the trial settings dialog, there is a new checkbox called sign. And when you click on that box to sign the trial, then you will be prompted to add your signature. So if you've never created a signature before, then the first step, of course, is to add the signature, and that is saved to your user profile. So that'll be saved on the local computer. And you can either draw with the mouse, which you can see my best attempt at a signature with the mouse. You can also upload an image. So if you have a little image that's in your email signature or something like that with your signature on it, you can drop that file onto ARM and it'll use that image, which might look nicer than the chicken scratch that I have here. But essentially you would create that signature that's saved to your profile so you can use it again and again. So you don't have to physically sign each and every time. Once you have your signature, the other component to signing a trial is confirming the role that you have in the trial. So this dropdown is the list of contacts in the site description, and you would select which contact you are. So we realized that the license name that you might be working in ARM with might not be the exactly match the name and contacts. So there's a little bit of checking. It'll kind of warn you, hey, just double check you picked the right person, but it will let you proceed. But just to make sure that you are in that list of contacts. And once you've confirmed that, now you can see over here on the right that this trial has been signed by me. And this is just my ID code, kind of internal code linked to my ARM license. And it shows that I was the cooperator in that trial, for example. So you can have multiple people sign off on a trial. So each contact in the study could sign the trial if needed. And once you sign the trial, that gets stamped in the notes section of the trial. If there is a change to the information in that trial after you've signed it, this checkbox will clear out. So that way you wouldn't sign off on something that you never saw. The signature itself can still say in the notes, there'll still be that record that you signed it at this point in time, but then there were changes afterwards that of course you would have no bearing on, then it wouldn't be valid for you to say that you've signed off on the change that you never saw. So that's the logic assigned to that signature there, which is kind of a common question we hear from time to time. People ask, is there a way to lock a trial from edits? Well, we really don't have a function where literally it would be impossible to make a change. It's not really great for, I think, really any software to have, but this would be a tool to accomplish something similar. If you want to be certain that there's no changes that you haven't reviewed or seen before, using the signature can be a good way to do that then. I'm going to sign this because I believe it's final. If I come back later and see this trial, wait a minute, my signature isn't, it's the checkbox is not signed anymore, would be an indication that something had changed. So that'd be another way to get to that common end goal of being aware if there was something that had changed after it was marked as final or after I was finished with it. Question about the confirmation here. So this step where you're selecting the contact and the role is specific to the trial. So you'll do the signature once and that gets saved to your profile and that can be used again and again. But each time you select the signature for this trial, you'll see this dialog and you'll select the role that you have. So that way, if this trial I was a cooperator and I selected that, but maybe the next trial I have a different role in that study. Maybe I'm the investigator in that study. Then I would have the list of contacts for that study, wherein I would maybe be the investigator, so I would choose that one. So this confirmation that is specific to each trial. The signature image here is what is saved to your settings, so that way you don't have to physically sign on the screen every single time or upload that image every single time. So just a good confirmation of how those two work together. A couple more smaller, oops, sorry, I'll go back here. What happens if changes are made after someone signs off? So as you can see here in this trial, I have signed off. If somebody opens this trial and makes a change, the checkbox here where it says this trial is signed would get cleared. So it is no longer marked as signed. There'll still be a record of when I signed this in the notes section. So you can still see that action occurred and my signature is related to the study, but the actual checkbox here to say this trial has been signed and is ready, that has been cleared because there was a change. And so now I'm no longer, in a sense, liable for that change in that sense, because I haven't seen what was done. So I can't have claim to have reviewed it, essentially. So a lot of this, came from Europe with the GEP requirements of needing to have a signature and signing off and finalizing trials. So we really modeled a lot of the actions to fit those rules. But I think there'll be a lot of value to it, even outside of those particular types of studies, just to have a signature spot. So a couple kind of additional components to this feature. For adding your signature, you can include the list of signatures on reports. So you'll find in the global report options, there's a section to include signatures. And basically whatever reports that you're printing out, it'll just add a signature page at the very end of your printout. And that will then show that image of the signature that was uploaded, as well as the date and the information about that signature. And again, if you had everyone from that contacts list sign off on the trial, you might have 4 or 5 signatures on this page, or multiple pages, just depending on how many signatures are added. And then there is also a study rule to require a signature. So I think that kind of answers the question about can't marking as final until somebody has signed off on it. This would be the way to do that. You can require a signature, and so that way you would just mark the and the condition would be everyone in the company. Essentially, that would require that somebody, at least one person, signs that trial, and one marking the trial as final. The study won't validate until it's been signed. So I think that would be the way to perform that question there. About ATD, I'm not certain on that. I might have to check with the developers on that. It would, it's a checkbox on the trial settings. So I think it would be maybe a yes, no, but I'm not quite sure how some of this information may or may not be stored. So I'd have to talk with the developers a little bit to see how that might impact a ATD database. I would say that you could poke around the ATD to see, how does the confidential flag come through? How does the review trial? These 2 checkboxes have been here for at least a little bit of time. And maybe there'll be something similar in the ATD, but again, that's kind of just a guess until I confirm. So good question on that. I'll jot that down to just run that past. And that would probably come up whenever you're doing your database maintenance, kind of updating the database for that. Yeah, that's interesting. Reviewed checkbox. Good question there. All right. The next feature, again, that ended up tying back to the user profile, is certificates. And again, this was also driven by GEP in Europe. And really, the feature is to save your GEP accreditation or your test facility information to your user profile. So those of you that might not be familiar with this, in a trial, there are some information. These 3 fields are all kind of linked together really to provide accreditation for the test facility where you're performing the research. And so there's kind of an official name of your facility. There's an accreditation number that gets assigned, and like an official document PDF that shows that accreditation for performing GEP studies at that location. And so these fields all need to be filled in to the trial, of course, to kind of certify its participation and validity. So that had to be filled in for every single trial that people would be working on. And so the idea was, well, instead of hand filling that in every time with kind of the same information, if you're at that same location, let's take those details and put it into the profile. So now here, I'm working on my ARM at this station. I can put down my facility, my accreditation number, that PDF link that shows that. I can fill this details in once and then just have ARM place that information into the trials that I'm working on. So that was really the goal here. So again, it makes it easier to populate that information mid-season. if my accreditation needs to be updated because it expires and I get a new accreditation. That was always a hurdle to go through. This makes it easy to update each trial. We actually also download that certificate PDF and attach it to the trial as well to kind of have that proof of certification. And then we also just have a expiration on the dialogue. That doesn't get saved into the trial itself, but it's a nice way for myself to double check, oh, it's coming up in this fall. I need to make sure I get that updated. So that's really the goal. Again, this was really specific to the GEP accreditation and their database and that system. But we specifically chose to call the section in the profile generically certificates. Perhaps in the future, there'll be another portion of the industry that has a certificate of some kind. We kind of want to keep it open, that it wouldn't have to be specific to this component, but maybe there'll be other accreditations or certifications out there in the industry that would be kind of nice to include in this section. So essentially, just kind of the workflow here, kind of address some questions here that me as the ARM user would fill in my test facility details, and then I would choose which trials to populate that information with. So if this is the trial I am working on, I'm the trialist that's going to perform this study, and therefore I need to fill in these details. Then you can see we made these read only, and there's the pencil mark here that will bring you to the profile. And then you just populate a button just says, all right, copy this information into this trial that I have open. And again, it is specific to the trial. So a protocol does not have these fields because it would be specific to the trial that is being performed. I'm not familiar with the other question about the test site. If that's a different field, perhaps. I'm not sure if that's related to this test facility or if that's an option for a different type of certificate in the future. I'm not familiar with that test site, if that's a separate field maybe on the editor. But again, hopefully this is a start and an opening for anything else that might appear in the industry going forward, if this is something that continues to grow. Oh, need to add 2 certificates. Yeah, so I suppose in that case, with the one trialist who might be using ARM on the computer might have more than one accreditation link, or perhaps you'd have 2 different trialists working on the same study, and each of them would have their own certificate that should be added. Because that would be possible currently, that you can download that certificate, and so you could have 2 people download the certificate. But I guess it would really there's only one spot for each of those values. Maybe it's for the expiration if it's changing, and I know that is handled. That if you've put in your accreditation, let's say this trial right here is going to go from 2022, July of 2022 into 2023. So I'd have to have this lapse. When I first put in this information, it will attach the PDF. Then in the middle of October, I realized, oh, my certificate expired. I have received a new one. I can update this information, update the trial details, and it will attach the new certificate. So now that trial will have 2 certificates attached. It will have the original one that was valid, up until October 1st, and then the new one that applies from October 1st onward would allow to have both of those. Hopefully that kind of addressed that scenario there. It will attach both of them. Even though we have just the one field here, you'll see in the attachments, both of them. I'm not familiar with a GLP certificate, but I think certainly if that is something common, that could be possible in the future. I would say with this development here, since that is not in the GEP accreditation, I think Terry's kind of helped us answer that question. For these particular fields, you would not want to use the GLP certificate, but definitely let us know if that's a common thing in trials. Maybe we simply need to add another section to the certificates for GLP accreditation, and whatever fields should be included in a trial, and then also in the profile. That's something in the future we could maybe add. So let us know if that's a very common thing that could be development for us in the future. As far as the printing the GEP certificate in the report, I don't think we have a specific button to do that. I don't think we have a report component that would print out an attachment. That would be just the one thought I would have, is if we had that to generically generate the attachments, but I'm guessing we don't. I don't think we have that functionality. So you would probably want to just generate the report, and then, if you had the Adobe to be able to merge two PDF documents or something, you could combine them. Just real quickly, I'll just check the print reports, but I don't think we have, I don't think we have something that would simply print out the attachments. So yeah, I would say we don't have that automatically at the moment, but maybe an idea for the future. Great comments and questions. All right. Moving on to a little bit quicker. So those are really the big highlights. I think the rest of these are a little bit smaller, but maybe just as impactful for people. This first one, really addressing protocol writers, kind of along the same vein as the protocol entries, of trying to encourage more information to be put into the protocol. And so this was a situation previously, if you put in a unit, but you do not put in a value, ARM would give errors in the validation to say, you've put in a unit, I need you to put in a value. Well, for a protocol writer, there's certain fields that, for example, here I use the example of crop density or pest density, where the protocol writer might want to communicate what unit should be used. So again, the idea of it being an instruction and not documentation. So we want them, want to be able to put in that instruction without ARM giving you grief and not validating the study. So we went through the list of fields, and we only did it for specific ones where it would make sense. And we made it so that the value field is not required only because the unit field has a value. Again, not for every single pair of value and unit, but ones that logically would make sense, that you may want to instruct the trialist what to use. So now you'll be able to do this. You can put in a unit and you will not get any of these errors. If you still want to be able to have the trialist get these types of errors and make sure the trialist, when they're documenting what was filled in, then you can use a study rule. So I think this gives a little more flexibility. You can still certainly have that ability to make sure they fill in the crop density or the pest density by just adding a study rule. And now the condition will allow you to control when these errors will happen. So if the protocol writer typically generates the trial file and then sends it to the trialist, they would be kind of blocked by these errors. Now they can have a study rule to say once data is filled into this column, then this information needs to be filled in. But I'm allowed to put in this unit ahead of time, so that way the trialist knows for sure what needs to be filled in. So again, just another tool in the toolbox, hopefully for protocol writers to again really fill in the protocol with what with instructions, and without having consequences down the road and issues down the road within the trial. A few options and changes to the reporting. We'll try to avoid getting too deep into the statistics, but we moved around a few options. So we had a section of descriptive statistics that were in the main report options section. If you've ever printed an AOV means table, you know there's a million options. So it was hard enough to keep track of them all. So we moved some of them off of that main screen and brought it into its own descriptive statistics tab. So the very same options, just in a new spot with some additions. And this was kind of what prompted us to move it to a different spot, is we added an option related to the normality tests. So the short of this is basically in the column diagnostics panel that we've had for a few years now. It really brought a new, more modern statistical approach to testing for the AOV assumptions. And so we wanted to bring those same calculations onto the report, of course, so the report matches the decisions made on the diagnostics panel. So now we have the option to be explicit as to how you're calculating those normality tests. And the residuals will match what was on the column diagnostics, that modern approach, and then kind of the classical historical approach. If you're going to replicate a report printed 5 years ago, you still have that option to choose and run the test that way, although that's not really recommended for current analysis. Same, another idea here, bringing that information from the column diagnostics onto the report. We added an option to include those diagnostic graphs. So again, it's the exact same graphs that are generated on the column diagnostics. Now you have an option to include those in your report printout if you'd like. This next one was an additional option for printing means on the report. And this one will bring the arithmetic mean onto the report as well. And this was really brought about as a request to see the raw, real mean of sorts. Basically, because the analyzed means on the report aren't always the mean of the raw values that are recorded. For example, if you have a data correction transformation, like in this case, this column has the square root transformation applied to the data, or if there's missing data, and then the analysis has a missing data adjustment, then your means might not match if you were to just look at the raw data and calculate the mean. And so that really becomes a question for people. That was a point of confusion we would get a lot in the reporting season. Why is this not the same? And so we really want that option to include what the mean from the raw data is really that arithmetic mean, while still keeping these, the statistically accurate information of that primary mean. So now that you have these two options, maybe the question is, well, what should I choose? What should I include? So just a general guideline, it probably kind of depends on your audience for the report. If the report is for a non-statistical audience, then it might be wise to include that arithmetic mean. And that you can include it, it'll be kind of a separate column, still within that same assessment. And you may not need to even de-transform those means, because really then that non-statistical person will be primarily interested in those arithmetic means and then the results of the comparisons, which again, you can see kind of this is the statistical world, and then this is the raw mean that might make the most sense to that person. If your audience is statistically inclined, that de-transforming of the means is probably familiar to them. And so it's probably not necessary to include the arithmetic mean. Really the way ARM was doing it before is statistically valid and recommended. So we really just added an option to be to make it easier to read and understandable by a non-statistical audience. Real quick here, just the way subsample data was, some of the calculations with the subsample data, specifically the automatic transformations, really just tweaked the way the transformation is applied. So that way it's applied to the plot mean and not the individual subsample values. Just really doesn't make a very big difference, but it's just a subtle one that makes it a little more consistent with the way AOV analyzes the data, which again is at the plot mean, so you kind of would match it. And this action, we did add an option. So if this threw a red flag, you wouldn't want that behavior, you can turn it off. But in theory, having this on, it's on by default. That's the kind of the more consistent route to take. And then you may have noticed this in the reporting. Previously, when you would have a row in the header that had multiple pieces of information, the crop, stage, majority, min, max, something with a value and a unit, we used to just have kind of a buffer space between each of those values. But especially you can see when you have 3 different values there, it can make the report kind of wide. So we compress that out, and instead of using just a bunch of space characters, we use the list character. In the US here, it's a comma. I think in Europe, typically it would be a semicolon. So it'll be specific to your Windows region settings. But this way, it really shrinks down all that extra space on the report and condenses things down nicely. I think you can see in this example, I went from 5 assessment columns to 8 on the same landscape page. So hopefully it can be a big impact. We had some changes for multi-factor designs. We added a completely random design with the factorial treatment arrangement. So essentially, if you've worked with factorials before in ARM, those were always a randomized complete block was how the treatments were arranged in that factorial design. And so we renamed what we used to call just factorial into factorial RCB. So that way it's more clear. That's what has always been there, and there's been no change to that functionality. But we did add a new type of factorial with the completely random design. So now there is no blocking. Those treatments can go anywhere, just like a regular CRD design. But you do have that factorial arrangement of treatments. So this request kind of came from greenhouse or lab trials where there is no blocking necessary. They can, the pot can sit anywhere on the tray or what have you. So we added that option as another design. This was a way to kind of help protocol writers to be able to multiply out the treatments. On the left here is kind of the classic way that treatments are described in a protocol. You're defining the factor levels. It can be a little hard, though, to visualize then the final treatment list that's in the trial. That gets all multiplied out in the trial. So we added this ability to multiply out treatments. It's a command in the tools menu to perform that multiplication, give you that full list while you're still in the protocol. So the goal here, it's just going to start playing for me, is kind of a particular example where there was 3 products that each had a different rate. And the design, the factorial part of the design was that we wanted each of those products at a different rate multiplier. So you can't just put in one value, because depending on what product it is, the rate is going to be multiplied by a value. So you were ended up being stuck. The only way to really achieve this would be to create the trial and manually adjust the values. So we wanted to bring that capability into the protocol. So here, while you're still in the protocol, you can create that multiplied out list and then clean up. So for example, this 2 pounds would be multiplied by 1, and then 2 pounds multiplied by 1.5. You can kind of clean up that list while you're still in the protocol. So now you can send that protocol out to all the trialists, and all of the trialists will have this nice, clear, obvious list to work from, and they don't have to decipher this kind of strange scenario. Just a quick note, if you do multiply out the treatments in that protocol, you can't go back. There isn't just a button to toggle back and forth, because of course, if you do make changes like this, then there's no way to go back. But you can use edit undo. So I was working with somebody and we just wanted to check to see if we filled in the treatments right. So we did a multiply out, just kind of looked at the list and said, yep, that looks great. And then we just did an edit undo to put it back to the original appearance. So that's one trick for that tool. Also for multi-factor designs, we brought in the level description, which is on your trial map. So if you have a nice, concise way to describe each level, you can fill that in here. And so that description is now used on the report. So you may see slightly different appearance on the like the FAOV report, because it can use the level descriptions now. If you want to go back to the old way where you just got treatment fields, then you can choose one of these other 2 options here in the report settings. But this will be on by default. Going kind of quick through some of these other ones. Data limits. You may have noticed in the rating unit field, there's now a minimum and a maximum. So this is the way to define the smallest and largest value that's valid for the assessment column. And some units might already have kind of a predefined minimum and maximum. So we've included that in the list. And really the reason we did this is because there were a couple of different places where you could have a rating limit defined. And it wasn't always obvious and clear how that would happen. So previously, between the ARM action codes, some rating types and some rating units could all potentially have a data limit defined. So we wanted to kind of eliminate that and make it really simple and clear. That's just that one spot to define that. So here's the list of action codes that we removed from the list, because these used to define a min-max. And so now each one of these instead, for example, the P would ensure that the values had to be between 0 and 100. So now instead of using the action code P, ARM will just put a 0 in for the minimum and 100 for the maximum. Same functionality, just more clear and obvious how that's happening. So these codes are removed from the list, but if you still remember them and like to use them, if you hand type in an H into an assessment column, action code ARM will delete the H, but put in 0 and 12. So it'll still recognize those codes if you're familiar with them, and it'll just convert for you and put that value in the min-max instead. We added some new fields to the header section for documenting more information about the crop and the pest at the time of assessment. So now we have all the combinations for diameter, for height, and for density for both crops and the pests. In each of those values, you can fill in the average across the whole trial, as well as record a smallest and a largest as well to kind of get an idea of the distribution at that time. In the assessment data section, we added new shortcut buttons to make it easy to bring up the trial map and also to sort the plots by your assessment order or your harvest order. So if you're not familiar with those orders, that's the movement arrows. There's a section on the trial map where you can define how you would move through the trial, both when you're taking an assessment and maybe when you're harvesting. Maybe that's got equipment with it, so it goes through the field in a different fashion. And so just by clicking one of those buttons, here actually the feature in action will kind of show that for you. This will just change the order. So the trial map will pop open the trial map right to the movement arrows section. So you can define those movement arrows. You can see it's just the way the arrows are being drawn on the map to show how you would move them. Got lots of different options to choose from. Once I accept those changes, then it's easy to change the order. Here we're sorted by plot. Now just clicking that button, the plot numbers have changed. So they are being sorted by that serpentine across blocks. And then clicking the harvest order now, that's a different order that was going across blocks instead of within blocks. So you can see the plots are changing if you're gonna enter in data or review your data. We tweaked how subsamples are dealt with, hopefully to make it a little easier. You can really just ask, we created a wizard before the dialogue was really cryptic. How many subsamples do you want, or how many do you want to delete? It was kind of confusing. So we just made it simpler. ARM will kind of ask you specifically what your intent is and make it easy to adjust. And then we dealt with the subsamples property within the trial. You used to, if you put in 10 for one of your columns, it would expand the whole trial to support 10 subsamples. And then if you came back and changed that to a 1, the trial was still expanded to have all 10, which didn't make any sense. If you don't have any columns that had that many subsamples, why do we still have those 10 kind of hiding in the background? So we made that simpler to use. Assessment images, we made it easier to remove linked images if ARM can't find the images. So if you were to send your trial to your sponsor, but the sponsor says we can't take photos, or you just keep your photos, we can't handle that many files or whatever. But previously you were kind of locked out. ARM would still have all of those attached and would kind of complain if it couldn't find those images. Well, now we made it so that you can remove those attachments if you don't plan to use those images any longer. Just a quick tweak to the sorting commands. so they're all in one button in one spot in the right click. I realize I've kind of hit my hour here. I have just a few slides that I may try to go through pretty quickly here, but don't want to hold anyone hostage either. So I'll open the door if you do have to go. I appreciate you joining us. I'll try to just cover these other ones real quickly. I'll include these slides in the email when we send the recording. So if you want to go a little slower through some of these later on at your own pace, I'll make sure to include that in the recording. All right, so real quickly, I'll get my auctioneer voice on. This one, I think, pretty obvious that you've seen in ARM before, that instead of having the whole validation list dialog come up for really short fields, we changed it to just a short little drop-down that appears on the screen. And I'm just kind of doing a comparison here, left and right of the old way, having that whole dialog come up, compared to the new way when it's you're just moving the mouse right in that field and you're just clicking to select something. You get done a lot faster. On the Contacts tab, we wanted to support the GDPR rules of being able to hide information if necessary. So within a contact, there is 19 individual boxes related to a particular contact. So we added a button to add 19 study rules all in one click to hide that for, in this case, study director. So you can hide all of that information with one click instead of right click and add a study rule for each and every field. Again, kind of supporting the GDPR. Nozzle description. So in the application equipment, we added a couple of fields, hopefully to make it a little more clear what piece of information should be filled in related to the nozzle part of your application equipment. And then we also made the nozzle model into a personal list. So then you can describe your nozzle and save that to a personal list so you can use again and again. Weather import, we just add support to recognize particular delimiters. So the semicolon wasn't working when trying to import weather data. And so we made it more flexible so you can specify what your decimal symbol might be in the file. Tree row volume, this is pretty similar to the leaf wall area from what we added in ARM at least. So if you're working with an application that deals with tree row volume, essentially think of maybe a tree in an orchard. You're not going to apply based on an area on the ground. You want to apply based on the volume of that tree. How tall is it and how wide around is it? Because really that canopy volume is what you care about. And so we just added support to be able to calculate that in ARM. And so I think we had all the fields already to create this calculation. So now we just added the calculation itself. We added rate units, so you can specify a treatment rate per tree row volume. And then of course the spray seeding plan can recognize that tree row volume and use that in the calculation. And also mix size will do the same as well. So just all the different components that are related to applications, updating ARM to be able to recognize and calculate things in terms of this tree row volume. Couple quick improvements to the study list. You can cut and paste into the filter fields. Before it was kind of clunky. And if you create a filter, open up a study to view it, and then you close that study to open the next one, that filter is saved and remembered. So you can quickly open a bunch of different trials as you're looking through and filtering. We teased this one earlier a little bit when we were showing feature highlights. Oops, sorry, let me go back here. The merge, the default action when merging from another study has always been to be additive, and it would never remove anything that you have entered in the current trial. Well, we added some options to be able to choose when something should be replaced in the current trial. So if you would like, you can replace whatever treatment list you have in your current study to bring in the treatment list from the other trial that you're merging in. Same thing for crops and pests, and you can also update your trial map randomization. So these are just options for the merge to give more flexibility in how you bring information in from another study. Custom labels, we added another option to export assessment column information. So this will generate a label, one label per treatment, and then for each data column that you select, you just choose which pieces of information from the data column you'd want to have. Finally, a couple of additions to ST, the summary across trials. There's a new option to include non-analyzable data columns in your ST summary. So these used to just automatically be tossed out and not included in a summary. We really wanted the option to include them if desired. And so non-analyzable is referring to a data column that has an action code basically marking it as non-analyzable. So N and N to M in a trial will say, I don't want to analyze the data. This column is just here for appearances or what have you. Maybe it's used in another calculation. So we just report certain information on the report, but I don't want it statistically calculated. There are also some calculated columns where the calculation is per treatment. So in a single trial, you end up with the same value in each replicate because it's per treatment. So in a single trial analysis, there's no variation. So there's nothing to do statistically. But if you combine those calculations across multiple trials, maybe it is valid to look at statistics there. So we wanted to have that capability in ST. Again, if I go back, it's just turning on this option in the summary options. And then those columns can be matched in your criteria if you set up your criteria to do so. And that's it. I made it through. Sorry, I ran a little long, but I appreciate those who could hang on for the last few slides. Like I said, I'll be sure to include this PowerPoint when we send you the recording. So if you want to go a little slower through those last sections, and if you have any questions about some of those features, definitely reach out. We can always help explain those further if we went a little fast. So thank you all for joining today, and hopefully we'll be seeing you soon at another webinar. We'll probably be scheduling out another set for the following month here, maybe next week or so. So thanks for the great questions and discussion throughout as well. Although just to answer your question here about that ARM verification, yeah, I believe that would be the standard that we typically do it just in the standard definitions. If you had a particular requirement for a different version, let us know. We could work with you if there was a requirement that you have for a different definition of ARM. But yeah, we typically do it just in the standard one.